When I sat down at the Sunday family dinner table, smoothing my apron after hours of cooking, I never expected my daughter-in-law Jessica to look across the roasted chicken I'd spent all afternoon preparing and say with a sweet smile, "You know, Margaret, it must be nice to be so useless that you have nothing better to do than cook all day." The words hit me like a slap across the face. My son Daniel, her husband, kept his eyes fixed on his plate, as if the pattern on the china was suddenly fascinating. My other son, Peter, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Jessica's smile didn't waver as she reached for the mashed potatoes I had whipped by hand for 20 minutes. Useless. I, who had hosted Sunday dinners for my family every single week for the past 12 years. I, who had spent $50 on the organic chicken she preferred, $30 on the wine she liked, and 4 hours in the kitchen making everything from scratch because she had mentioned she was on a health kick. I was useless. I stood there in my own dining room, holding a serving spoon that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my family eat the food I had prepared while pretending they hadn't heard what had just been said. The lace tablecloth I had ironed that morning, the fresh flowers I had arranged in the center, the homemade apple pie cooling on the counter for dessert, all of it suddenly felt foolish. Jessica, my daughter-in-law's mother, Linda, who was also at the table, let out a nervous laugh. "Margaret's cooking is wonderful. We're so lucky she does this every week." "Oh, I didn't mean it as an insult," Jessica said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I just meant that some people have careers and responsibilities, and some people have time to play housewife. Different life choices, you know. Different life choices. As if raising 2 sons alone after my husband died when they were 10 and 12 wasn't a choice. As if working double shifts as a nurse for 25 years while making sure my boys had home-cooked meals and help with homework wasn't a choice. As if retiring at 65 after a lifetime of service wasn't something I had earned. I had spent $150 on this dinner. I had made Daniel's favorite roasted chicken with herbs from my garden. I had prepared Peter's wife Sarah's requested gluten-free stuffing. I had bought the expensive imported cheese Jessica liked for the appetizers. And now, sitting at my table, eating my food, she was calling me useless. For weeks, I had noticed the little comments. The way Jessica would walk into my kitchen and say, "Oh, you're cooking again? Don't you get bored?" The way she would talk about her job at the marketing firm as if it was saving lives while my nursing career had been just passing time. The way she would mention how Daniel deserved someone more ambitious, more successful, more everything that apparently I had failed to teach him to value. But this was different. This was a direct attack, delivered with a smile, in front of my entire family. And everyone was just going to sit there and pretend it hadn't happened. "The chicken is delicious, Mom," Peter said quietly, his eyes meeting mine for just a second. I saw the apology there, but I also saw the helplessness. He didn't want to cause a scene. None of them did. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I sat down in my chair, the one at the head of the table that had been my husband's before he passed. The chair I had earned through 40 years of marriage, 35 years of widowhood, and countless Sunday dinners where I had held this family together. Jessica continued talking, as if her comment had been completely normal. "Daniel and I are thinking about buying a vacation home in the Hamptons. Of course, we'll need to work extra hours to afford it, but that's what successful people do, right? We don't have time to waste on hobbies like cooking." Hobbies like cooking. The meal in front of her wasn't a hobby. It was love translated into food. It was tradition. It was the glue that kept our family coming together week after week, year after year. But to her, it was just a hobby, a waste of time, something useless people did. I looked around the table. Daniel still wouldn't meet my eyes. Peter was focused on cutting his chicken into smaller and smaller pieces. Sarah looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Linda, Jessica's mother, was nodding along to her daughter's monologue about the Hamptons house, the beach, the parties they would throw. "We're thinking 4 bedrooms, Jessica continued, "though I suppose we won't need to invite everyone all the time. Only people who can actually contribute to the conversation, you know? Not just people who talk about recipes and gardening." There it was again. Another dig, another insult wrapped in a pretty package and delivered with a smile. I realized in that moment that this wasn't new. This had been building for months, maybe even years. Every comment about my simple life, every suggestion that I should find something meaningful to do with my retirement, every time she had made me feel small for the choices I had made, the life I had lived, the person I was. I thought about all the Sunday dinners I had hosted, not just 12 years of weekly gatherings, but decades before that when my husband was alive. The birthdays celebrated around this table, the holidays, the graduations, the promotion celebrations. The times I had stayed up until midnight preparing food because someone in the family had a special request. I calculated in my head, 12 years of Sunday dinners. That's 624 dinners. At an average of $100 per dinner, because I always bought the best for my family, that was $62,400. $62,400 I had spent feeding people who apparently thought I was useless. And it wasn't just the money, it was the time. 4 hours every Sunday to shop, prepare, cook, serve, and clean up. That's 2,496 hours over 12 years. That's 104 full days. More than 3 months of my life spent in the kitchen for Sunday dinners alone. "Margaret, you're being very quiet," Linda said, her voice bringing me back to the present. "Is everything all right?" I looked at her. This woman who had raised a daughter who thought it was acceptable to insult her mother-in-law in her own home while eating her food. "Everything is fine, Linda. I'm just thinking." "Well, don't hurt yourself," Jessica laughed. "Thinking too hard at your age can be dangerous." At my age, I was 67 years old. I had run marathons in my 50s. I volunteered at the hospital twice a week. I maintained a garden that won awards from the local horticultural society. I read 2 books a month. I took online courses in history and art. But to Jessica, I was just an old woman whose brain might break from thinking too hard. "Jessica," Daniel finally spoke, his voice weak. "That's not nice." "Oh, Daniel, I'm just teasing," she said, reaching over to pat his hand. "Your mom knows I'm kidding. We have that kind of relationship, right, Margaret? Where we can joke around?" We did not have that kind of relationship. We had the kind of relationship where she insulted me, and I was expected to smile and take it because she was married to my son. We had the kind of relationship where my feelings didn't matter as long as everyone else was comfortable. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me for a moment. I need to check on the dessert." In the kitchen, I stood at the counter, my hands gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. The apple pie sat there, golden and perfect, steam still rising from the slits in the crust. I had made it with apples from my own tree, cinnamon I had bought at the farmer's market, and a recipe that had been passed down from my grandmother. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't want to serve dessert to my family. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to feed the people I loved. Because standing there in my kitchen, listening to the muffled conversation in the dining room, I realized something that made my blood run cold. They were laughing. I could hear Jessica's voice, bright and cheerful, telling some story. I could hear the others chuckling along. Not one of them had come to check on me. Not one of them had defended me. Not one of them had said, "Jessica, that was cruel, and you need to apologize." I was useless to them. Not because I didn't do anything, but because everything I did was expected. It was assumed. It was taken for granted. The Sunday dinners would always be there. Mom would always cook. Margaret would always host. The useless old woman with nothing better to do than feed her family. When I walked back into the dining room carrying the pie, my hands were steady, but something inside me had shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder. It was clarity. "Who wants dessert?" I asked, my voice perfectly normal. "Oh, I really shouldn't," Jessica said, patting her flat stomach. "I have to fit into my new dresses for the Hamptons. But I'm sure some people don't have to worry about that anymore." Another insult. Another dig at my age, my body, my life. I cut slices of pie and served them to everyone except Jessica, who had declined. When I sat down with my own slice, Jessica leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You know, Daniel tells me you're always asking when we're going to give you grandchildren. Maybe if you weren't so useless, he'd want to bring children around you." The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But they also did something else. They woke something up inside me that had been sleeping for far too long. A part of me that had been silent, compliant, desperate to keep the peace and hold the family together. That part of me was done being silent. As I watched my family eat my homemade apple pie, I made a decision, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. I smiled. I cleaned up. I sent everyone home with containers of leftovers, just like I always did. I hugged my sons goodbye. I even hugged Jessica, though her embrace was as fake as her smile. When the last car pulled away from my driveway, I stood at my front door and looked at my house, the home I had maintained for 40 years, the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, the dining room where I had created countless memories. And I thought about next Sunday, about the dinner that was expected, about the family who would show up assuming everything would be exactly as it always had been. But something had changed. I had changed, and they were about to find out exactly how useless I really was. I walked to my calendar hanging in the kitchen and looked at the red circle around next Sunday. Below it, in my neat handwriting, I had written, "Family dinner, 6 p.m. I picked up a pen and drew a single black line through the words. Then I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine I had bought for Jessica, sat down in my living room, and began to plan. For the first time in 12 years, I was going to have a Sunday to myself. And my family was going to learn a lesson about what happens when you call someone useless. They had no idea what was coming. Monday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. as I had for the past 40 years. But instead of my usual routine of checking my phone for messages from my sons, planning the week's meals, and making my grocery list, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I stayed in bed. Not because I was tired, not because I was sick, but because for the first time in my adult life, I had no obligations. No one needed me to cook. No one needed me to plan. No one needed me to do anything at all because, according to Jessica, I was useless anyway. The sunlight streamed through my bedroom curtains, and I watched the dust particles dance in the golden rays. When was the last time I had simply laid in bed and watched sunlight? I couldn't remember. There had always been something to do, someone to take care of, some responsibility pulling me out of bed before I was ready. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Daniel. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, I picked up. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, my voice perfectly normal. "Mom, hi. I just wanted to call and, check on you." His voice was uncomfortable, guilty. "About yesterday. Jessica didn't mean anything by those comments. You know how she is. She jokes around." I was silent for a moment, remembering all the times I had made excuses for people who hurt me, all the times I had smoothed things over to keep the peace, all the times I had swallowed my pain so others could be comfortable. "Daniel," I said calmly, "does Jessica joke when she talks about her job? Does she laugh when she discusses her accomplishments?" "Well, no, but that's different." "You're right, it is different. She's serious about the things she values, and she jokes about the things she thinks don't matter, like me." "Mom, that's not fair. She doesn't think." "Daniel, I have to go. I have things to do today." I didn't. But he didn't need to know that. "Oh, okay. We're still on for Sunday dinner, right?" I looked at my calendar on the wall, at the black line I had drawn through the words. "We'll see," I said. "Have a good week, sweetheart." I hung up before he could respond. The silence that followed was strange. Not uncomfortable, but new, different. For decades, I had filled every silence with activity, with service, with making sure everyone else was happy. Now, the silence was just mine. At 10 a.m., I did something I hadn't done in 12 years. I called the volunteer coordinator at the hospital where I used to work and asked if they needed extra help during the week. Margaret, Carol, the coordinator, sounded delighted. "We would love to have you. You always said you could only do weekends because of family obligations." Family obligations. Every Sunday for 12 years had been blocked off as sacred family time. Time I spent in my kitchen while my family lived their lives, only gathering once a week to eat what I had prepared and then scatter again. "I'm available now," I said, "every day if you need me." We scheduled me for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings, 4 hours each day. 12 hours a week I would spend doing something meaningful, something that mattered, something that people actually appreciated. At noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Peter. "Mom, Daniel told me about your conversation. Are you okay?" I stared at the message for a long time. Was I okay? I had been insulted in my own home. My family had sat silent while it happened. My son was now making excuses for his wife's cruelty. But yes, strangely enough, I was okay. Better than okay. I texted back, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Enjoying a quiet day." What I didn't tell him was that I had also called my friend Martha, whom I hadn't seen in months because Sunday visits always ran long and left me too tired for social engagements. We made plans for Sunday brunch. A real brunch, at a nice restaurant where someone else would cook and serve and clean up. Tuesday morning, Jessica called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Margaret, hi. Her voice was bright, cheerful, as if Sunday had never happened. I was thinking, for this week's dinner, could you make that salmon thing you do, with the dill sauce? Daniel's been craving it. I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had spent countless hours preparing meals for people who thought I was useless. Jessica, I said slowly, I'm not sure about Sunday dinner this week. What do you mean you're not sure? Her tone shifted immediately, the sweetness evaporating. It's Sunday. We always have dinner at your place on Sunday. Yes, we do. We always do. But I'm thinking of making different plans this week. Different plans? She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. What different plans could you possibly have? You said yourself you have nothing but time. That's exactly right, I replied. I have time, and I'm deciding how to spend it. Margaret, Daniel expects. Daniel is a 5-year-old man with a wife and a career. I'm sure he can figure out dinner for one Sunday. The silence on the other end was thick with shock. Are you serious right now? Completely serious. Because of what I said? Her voice turned sharp. Because I made one little joke, and now you're going to punish the whole family? One little joke. That's what years of condescension, months of insults, and one devastating public humiliation had been reduced to. One little joke. Jessica, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply making other plans. Surely someone as successful and busy as you can understand having other plans. This is ridiculous. You're being childish. Perhaps, I said calmly. Or perhaps I'm finally being honest. I'll let you know about Sunday. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from exhilaration. For the first time in my relationship with Jessica, I had said no. I had set a boundary. I had refused to simply accept whatever treatment she decided to dish out. Wednesday afternoon, I was at the hospital, reading to patients in the children's ward, when my phone rang 3 times in succession. Daniel, Peter, Daniel again. I silenced my phone and continued reading Charlotte's Web to a little girl named Emma who was recovering from surgery. She looked up at me with big brown eyes and said, "You're really good at the voices." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, feeling something warm bloom in my chest. Here was someone who appreciated what I did. Here was someone who saw value in my presence. When I finished my shift, I checked my messages. Daniel, Mom, Jessica says you're canceling Sunday dinner. Please tell me that's not true. Peter, Mom, what's going on? Daniel's freaking out. Daniel, Mom, please call me back. This isn't like you. He was right. It wasn't like me. The old me would have immediately called back, apologized for causing concern, and assured everyone that of course Sunday dinner was still on. The old me would have put everyone else's comfort before my own dignity. But something had changed on Sunday night when I drew that black line through my calendar. Something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of who I was and what I deserved. I texted both of them. I'm fine, just busy. We'll call later. Thursday morning, I did something else I hadn't done in years. I went to the garden center and bought $200 worth of new plants for my garden. Not vegetables for cooking, not herbs for Sunday dinners, flowers. Beautiful, impractical, utterly useless flowers that would do nothing but make me happy. The young man at the register, his name tag reading Josh, helped me load the plants into my car. Someone's going to have a beautiful garden, he said, smiling. Yes, I replied. She is. That afternoon, I spent 4 hours in my garden, my hands in the dirt, the sun warm on my back. I planted roses and lavender and daisies. I created a small meditation corner with a bench I had bought on impulse. I made my garden into something that was entirely for me. My neighbor, Helen, came over around 5 p.m. Margaret, the garden looks beautiful. I've never seen you out here on a Thursday before. You're usually prepping for your Sunday dinners. Not this week, I said, wiping dirt from my hands. Oh? Everything okay with the family? I looked at her. This neighbor I'd known for 15 years but had never really had time to get to know because I was always too busy being useful. Helen, do you have plans for Sunday? I was thinking of trying that new brunch place downtown, and I'd love some company. Her face lit up. I would love that. I've been wanting to go there for months. We made plans, exchanged phone numbers, and she invited me to her book club that met on Tuesday evenings. Another piece of life I had denied myself because Tuesdays were for meal planning and grocery shopping for Sunday dinners. Friday morning at the hospital, Carol pulled me aside. "Margaret, I just want to say, we've gotten such wonderful feedback about you this week. The patients adore you. One of the doctors even asked if you'd consider doing this full-time." Full-time. A schedule. A purpose. A place where I was valued not for what I could cook or serve, but for who I was. "I'll think about it," I said, but I was already thinking yes. Friday evening, Daniel showed up at my door unannounced. I saw him through the window, standing on my porch in his work suit, looking nervous. For a moment, I considered not answering, but he was still my son. I still loved him, even if I was disappointed in him. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, opening the door. "This is a surprise. Can I come in?" I stepped aside, and he walked into the living room, looking around as if he'd never seen the place before. Maybe he hadn't, not really. Maybe to him it had always just been the backdrop for Sunday dinners, not a home where a person lived and breathed and had feelings. "Mom, what's going on? Jessica says you're canceling Sunday dinner. You're not answering calls. Peter says you seem different. Are you okay?" I sat down in my favorite chair, the one by the window where I read in the mornings. "Daniel, let me ask you something. On Sunday, when Jessica called me useless, what did you think?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, she was just—" "What did you think?" I repeated firmly. He was silent for a long moment. I thought it was mean. I thought I should say something. But I didn't want to cause a scene. "So you let her say it. You let her insult me in my own home, at my own table, while eating food I had spent hours preparing. Because you didn't want to cause a scene. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have said something. But Jessica's just like that sometimes. She doesn't mean—" "Daniel," I cut him off. "Does Jessica insult her colleagues at work and then say she doesn't mean it?" "No." "Does she insult her friends and then laugh it off as a joke?" "No." "So why is it acceptable for her to insult me?" He had no answer. We both knew why. Because I had always accepted it. Because I had always made excuses. Because I had always put keeping the peace above my own dignity. "I love you," I said quietly. "You're my son, and I will always love you. But I will not continue to accept disrespect in my own home. Not from Jessica, not from anyone." "So what does that mean? No more Sunday dinners?" "It means," I said carefully, "that I'm rethinking how I spend my time and energy. For 12 years, I've hosted Sunday dinner every single week. I've spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours creating a space for this family to gather. And last Sunday, I was called useless for it. Jessica will apologize. I'll make sure she apologizes. Daniel, I don't want a forced apology. I want respect, real respect, the kind that doesn't require you to make someone apologize after they've hurt me." He stood up, ran his hand through his hair the way he used to when he was a boy, and didn't understand his homework. "So what now?" "Now, I'm going to live my life. I'm volunteering at the hospital 3 days a week. I'm having brunch with friends on Sunday. I'm joining a book club. I'm doing things that make me happy." "And Sunday dinners?" I looked at him, this man I had raised, this son I loved, who had watched his wife hurt me and done nothing. "I don't know yet, Daniel. I honestly don't know." After he left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Not the false peace of swallowing my hurt to keep others comfortable, but the genuine peace of knowing I had finally stood up for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha. "So excited for Sunday brunch. It's been too long, friend." I smiled and texted back, "Me too. I'm ready for something new." Outside my window, the sun set over my garden, painting the new flowers in shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow was Saturday. Normally, I would spend it shopping and prepping for Sunday's dinner. Instead, I was going to sleep in, read a book, and maybe call my sister whom I hadn't talked to in months because I was always too tired after Sunday dinners. For the first time in 12 years, I was looking forward to Sunday. Not because I would be serving others, but because I would be taking care of myself. They had called me useless, and in doing so, they had set me free. Sunday morning, I woke up at 8 a.m. instead of 6. No alarm, no rushing to start preparations. Just the gentle sunlight streaming through my curtains and the sound of birds in the garden I had planted 3 days ago. For the first time in 12 years, Sunday morning was mine. I made myself a cappuccino using the expensive machine I had bought 2 years ago, but rarely used because I was always too busy making breakfast for a family that would arrive 6 hours later. I sat in my garden on the new bench, sipping my coffee, watching butterflies dance among the roses. At 9:30, my phone started ringing. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:45, Peter called. I sent it to voicemail. At 10 a.m., Jessica called. I turned my phone off completely. At 11:30, I got dressed in a beautiful cream-colored dress I had bought 3 years ago and never worn because it seemed too nice for cooking in my own kitchen. I did my makeup carefully, taking my time with the eyeliner. I wore the pearl earrings my husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Not a cook, not a servant, not someone's useless mother or mother-in-law, just Margaret. A woman who had lived, loved, worked, and deserved respect. At noon, I picked up Martha from her house. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Margaret, you look absolutely radiant. What's gotten into you?" "Freedom," I said simply. "Pure freedom." The brunch restaurant was everything I had hoped for. White tablecloths, fresh flowers on every table, and a menu full of dishes I would never make at home because they were too complicated or too expensive or too something. Martha and I ordered mimosas. When was the last time I had day drunk? I couldn't remember. There had always been dinner to prepare, family to take care of, responsibilities that kept me sober and serious. "So," Martha said after we ordered our food, "are you going to tell me what's really going on? You canceled on me 3 times in the last 6 months because of family obligations, and now suddenly you're free on a Sunday?" I told her everything. The insult, the silent family, the week of saying no, the decision to reclaim my life. Martha listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to anger to something that looked like pride. "Good for you," she said when I finished. "Do you know how many times I wanted to tell you that you were letting them take advantage of you? But you seemed so happy to do it, so devoted to those Sunday dinners." "I thought I was holding the family together," I admitted. "I thought if I stopped, everything would fall apart." "And maybe it will," Martha said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "But Margaret, you've been falling apart for years. We all saw it. The way you'd cancel plans because someone needed you. The way you'd look exhausted every Monday. The way you stopped talking about yourself and only talked about your sons, your daughter-in-law, your family dinners." Her words hit me like cold water. I had been falling apart. I had been disappearing, piece by piece, Sunday by Sunday, into the role of cook and hostess and the woman who would always say yes. Our food arrived. Eggs Benedict with smoked salmon, fresh fruit, pastries that flaked perfectly under my fork. I hadn't realized how much I had missed eating food that someone else had prepared with care. "What are you going to do now?" Martha asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Part of me wants to never host another Sunday dinner again. Part of me misses the idea of family gathered around my table. But I know I can't go back to the way things were." "Good," Martha said firmly. "Because the way things were was slowly killing you." At 2 p.m., I dropped Martha off and drove home. There were 5 cars parked in front of my house. My heart started pounding. I recognized all of them. Daniel's BMW, Peter's Toyota, Jessica's Mercedes, Sarah's Honda, and Linda's Lexus. They were all here. On the Sunday I had said I wouldn't be hosting. On the day I had chosen to take care of myself instead of them. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to drive away, to let them sit there and wonder where I was. But this was my house, my home. I wouldn't be driven away from it. I got out of the car and walked toward my front door with my head high. Daniel saw me first. He was sitting on the porch steps, and he jumped up when I approached. "Mom, thank God. We've been so worried. You weren't answering your phone, and—" "I turned it off," I said calmly, walking past him to unlock my door. "I was at brunch." "Brunch?" Jessica's voice came from behind me. She was standing by her car with her arms crossed. "You were at brunch while we all came here expecting Sunday dinner?" I turned to look at her, this woman who had called me useless in my own home. She was wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked annoyed, put out, as if I had somehow wronged her. "Yes, Jessica. I was at brunch, with my friend, because I told you I was making other plans this Sunday." "We thought you were kidding," Peter's wife, Sarah, said softly. "We thought you'd never actually cancel Sunday dinner." "Why?" I asked, looking at each of them in turn. Because I'm so useless that I have nothing better to do? The silence was deafening. Jessica's face flushed red. Daniel looked at his feet. Peter opened his mouth and then closed it again. That's what I thought, I said quietly. I unlocked my door and walked inside, leaving it open behind me. They followed me in like ducklings, all of them crowding into my living room. Linda, Jessica's mother, was the last to enter, and she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Margaret, she started, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I cut her off gently. Your daughter called me useless. My family sat silent. I decided I was done accepting that treatment. That's all very clear. It was a joke, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. Was it? I asked. Because you've made a lot of jokes over the past few months, Jessica. Jokes about my age. Jokes about my retirement. Jokes about how I have nothing better to do than cook. At what point do jokes become just cruel truths, delivered with a smile? Mom, Daniel stepped forward. Jessica wants to apologize. We talked about it. She knows she went too far. I looked at Jessica. She was staring at me with something between anger and shock, as if she couldn't believe I was actually standing up to her. Is that true, Jessica? Do you want to apologize? I'm sorry if you took offense, she said stiffly. If I took offense, I repeated the words slowly. Not I'm sorry I said something cruel. Not I'm sorry I disrespected you. Just sorry if I took offense to being called useless in my own home. Fine, Jessica snapped. I'm sorry I called you useless. There. Are you happy now? Can we move past this? No, I said simply. Everyone stared at me. No? Daniel asked. Mom, she apologized. She apologized because you made her. She apologized because she wants Sunday dinners to go back to normal. She didn't apologize because she actually understands why what she said was wrong. I walked to my kitchen and looked at it. The spotless counters, the organized cabinets, the stove that had cooked thousands of meals. This room had been my kingdom and my prison. Do you know, I said, turning back to face them, that I've hosted 624 Sunday dinners in the past 12 years. I calculated it. That's $62,400 spent on food. That's 2,496 hours in this kitchen. That's more than 3 months of my life. I walked back to the living room and looked at each of them. And in all that time, not one of you ever asked me if I wanted to do it. Not one of you ever offered to host instead. Not one of you ever said, Mom, you've been doing this for years. Let us take care of you for once. It was just expected. Margaret will cook. Margaret will host. Margaret has nothing better to do. We didn't know you felt that way, Peter said quietly. You always seemed happy to do it. I was happy, I admitted. For a long time, I was. I loved bringing you all together. I loved cooking for you. I loved being the center that held this family together. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about love and started being about obligation. My obligation to you, with no reciprocation. That's not fair, Jessica said. We've always been grateful. Have you? I asked. When was the last time any of you thanked me for Sunday dinner? When was the last time any of you brought a dish to share the load? When was the last time any of you called me during the week just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something. The silence was my answer. Last Sunday, I continued, Jessica called me useless. And you know what? She was right, in a way. I had become useless to myself. I had stopped living my own life because I was so busy facilitating yours. This week, I volunteered at the hospital. I've made new friends. I've joined a book club. I've planted a garden just for me. And I've realized something important. I paused, looking at each of their faces. I've realized that I don't need you to need me. I need to need myself. So what does that mean? Daniel asked, his voice small. No more family dinners? You're just done with us? I'm not done with you, I said softly. I love you, all of you. Even you, Jessica, despite everything. But I'm done with the way things have been. I'm done being taken for granted. I'm done accepting disrespect. I'm done making your lives convenient at the expense of my own dignity. What do you want from us? Peter asked. It was a fair question. What did I want? I want respect, I said finally. Real respect. Not the kind that disappears the moment someone thinks they can get away with an insult. I want appreciation that's shown, not just assumed. And I want reciprocity. If we're going to be a family that gathers for meals, then everyone contributes. Everyone hosts sometimes. Everyone shares the responsibility. And if we agree to that? Daniel asked hopefully. Then maybe, eventually, we can have Sunday dinners again. But not every week, and not always here, and not because anyone expects or demands it, but because we all want to. Jessica made a sound that might have been a laugh or a scoff. This is ridiculous. You're holding the entire family hostage over one comment. No, Jessica, I said, my voice hard. You made one comment that revealed years of disrespect, and I'm finally refusing to accept it. There's a difference. She grabbed her purse. This is insane. Daniel, are you going to let your mother talk to me like this? Daniel looked between us, torn. For a moment, I thought he would side with her again, but then he did something that surprised me. Jessica, Mom's right. You were cruel, and I should have said something last Sunday. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry. Jessica's face went red. Fine. Stay here with your mommy. I'm leaving. She stormed out, and Linda followed her after giving me an apologetic look. The rest of us stood in awkward silence. Finally, Sarah spoke up. Margaret, Peter, and I would love to host a family dinner at our place sometime. If you'd like to come, no pressure. I looked at her, this quiet daughter-in-law who had always been kind but never stood up to Jessica. I would like that very much, Sarah. Thank you. And Mom, Peter added, I'm sorry too. We took you for granted. All of us did. After they left, Daniel lingered at the door. Mom, thank you for standing up for yourself. I should have done it for you. You're a grown man, Daniel, I said gently. I can't expect you to fight my battles, but I can expect you to not make me fight them alone. What about Jessica? Are you two ever going to be okay? I don't know, I said honestly. That depends on whether she can learn to respect me, and whether you can learn to expect that she does. After everyone left, I stood in my living room, exhausted but exhilarated. My phone, which I had turned back on, showed 47 missed calls and 23 text messages. I deleted them all without reading them. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat in my garden, and watched the sunset paint my new flowers gold and pink. Tomorrow was Monday. I would volunteer at the hospital. I would read to children. I would be appreciated for who I was, not what I could provide. And that was more than enough. Monday morning at the hospital, I was reading Where the Wild Things Are to a 6-year-old boy named Tommy when my phone buzzed for the 15th time that hour. I had made a rule for myself: no phone during volunteer hours. These children deserved my full attention, not the distracted presence of someone constantly checking messages. But Carol, the volunteer coordinator, knocked gently on the door of the reading room. Margaret, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. My heart sank. I knew who it was before I even walked to the lobby. Jessica stood near the information desk, her arms crossed, her face a mask of controlled fury. She was still wearing her work clothes, a sharp blazer and pencil skirt that screamed power and success. Jessica, I said calmly, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Her voice was clipped, professional, the same tone I imagined she used with incompetent employees. I'm volunteering. I have 2 more hours. This can't wait. I looked at her for a long moment. The old Margaret would have immediately dropped everything, apologized profusely, and followed her outside. The new Margaret had different priorities. It will have to wait, I said. I made a commitment to these children. If you'd like to discuss something, you can come to my house at 2 p.m. Her jaw dropped. You're choosing reading stories over your own family? I'm choosing to honor my commitments, I replied. Something I've done for you countless times. Surely you can extend me the same courtesy. I walked back to the reading room without waiting for her response. Tommy looked up at me with wide eyes. Was that lady mad at you? A little bit, I admitted, sitting back down. Why? Because I'm finally learning to say no when people ask me to do things that aren't good for me. My mom says no to me all the time, Tommy said matter-of-factly. She says it's because she loves me, out of the mouths of babes. Your mom is very wise, Tommy. At exactly 2 p.m., Jessica's Mercedes pulled into my driveway. I watched from my window as she sat in her car for a full 3 minutes, checking her phone, fixing her makeup, preparing herself. When I opened the door, she walked in without being invited. Would you like some tea? I asked. I don't want tea, Margaret. I want to understand what the hell is going on. I gestured to the living room. Please, sit. She perched on the edge of my sofa, her back rigid. I settled into my favorite chair, the afternoon light streaming through the window behind me. "Yesterday was humiliating," she said. "You made me look like a villain in front of everyone." "I didn't make you look like anything, Jessica. I simply stated facts. You called me useless. I decided I was done accepting disrespect." "Those are both true statements." "One comment," she hissed. "One stupid comment, and you've turned it into this massive drama. Do you know what Daniel's been like? He barely slept last night. He keeps saying he should have defended you sooner. You've made him feel guilty for something that wasn't even his fault." "It wasn't his fault that you insulted me," I agreed. "But it was his choice to stay silent when you did. Those are different things." Jessica stood up and paced to the window. "This is ridiculous. We're family. Family forgives each other. Family moves on. Family also respects each other," I countered. "Tell me, Jessica, do you talk to your colleagues the way you talk to me?" "That's different." "How?" "They're professionals." She stopped, realizing where the sentence was going. "They're what?" I pressed gently. "Important? Worthy of respect? Unlike me?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean when you called me useless? What did you mean all those times you joked about me having nothing better to do? What did you mean when you suggested I was wasting my retirement?" She turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw something besides anger in her face. Frustration, yes, but also confusion, genuine confusion. "I don't know," she said finally. "I guess I just never thought about it. You were always just there, always cooking, always hosting. It seemed like that's what you wanted to do. And you never asked if it was." "No," she admitted. "I didn't." I let the silence sit between us for a moment. This was progress, small as it was. Acknowledgement without excuses. "Jessica, can I tell you something?" I leaned forward. "When I was your age, I was a nurse. I worked 60-hour weeks. I raised 2 boys alone after my husband died. I bought this house with money I earned. I built a career. I had a life that was full and meaningful. I know." "Let me finish," I said firmly. "When I retired, everyone told me how lucky I was to have so much free time. And I thought hosting Sunday dinners would be a way to stay connected to my sons, to build a relationship with their wives, to create something meaningful. But somewhere, along the way, it became the only thing I was known for. Margaret the cook, Margaret the hostess, not Margaret the nurse, not Margaret the widow who raised 2 successful men, not Margaret the person." Jessica sat back down, her professional armor cracking just slightly. "I'm sorry," she said. And this time, her voice was different, quieter. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way." "I know you didn't mean to," I said, "but you did. And the thing about unintentional hurt is that it still hurts." "So what now?" she asked. "Do you hate me? Are you going to turn Daniel against me?" "I don't hate you, Jessica, and I would never turn my son against his wife. But I also won't pretend that everything is fine when it's not." "What do you want from me?" It was the same question Daniel had asked. What did I want? "I want you to see me as a person, not a service provider. I want you to think before you speak. And I want you to understand that respect isn't something you give only to people you consider successful or important. It's something you give to everyone, especially family." Jessica nodded slowly. "I can try to do that." "Trying is a start," I said. "But Jessica, if you ever speak to me that way again, there won't be a second chance. I'm too old and too tired to keep proving that I deserve basic human dignity." She left 20 minutes later, and I couldn't tell if anything had really changed. But at least we had talked. Really talked, not just exchanged pleasantries over roast chicken. That evening, Peter and Sarah came by with dinner. Sarah had made lasagna, and Peter brought wine. "We wanted to check on you," Sarah said as we sat in my kitchen. "Yesterday was intense." "It needed to happen," I replied. "I should have stood up for myself a long time ago." "We should have stood up for you," Peter corrected. "Sarah and I talked about it last night. We've watched Jessica treat you like that for months, and we never said anything because we didn't want to cause problems." "But our silence caused problems," Sarah added. "It made her think that behavior was acceptable, and it made you feel alone." I felt tears prick my eyes. This was what I had needed. Not just an apology, but understanding. Acknowledgement that the problem wasn't just Jessica's cruelty, but everyone's complicity. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Both of you." "Mom," Peter said carefully, "can I ask you something? Why did you let it go on so long? You're not exactly a pushover. You raised us to stand up for ourselves. So why didn't you? It was a fair question. I had asked myself the same thing all week. Because I was afraid, I admitted. Afraid that if I stopped being useful, I would stop being wanted. Afraid that if I said no to Sunday dinners, you would stop coming around. Afraid that if I demanded respect, I would be seen as difficult or bitter or just a cranky old woman. You're not old, Sarah said. I'm 67, I laughed. I'm definitely old. But you're right that I shouldn't let that be an excuse for accepting poor treatment. We ate Sarah's lasagna, which was delicious, and talked about things we had never talked about before. Real things. How Peter had always felt caught between his brother and his wife. How Sarah had wanted to speak up but didn't know how. How they had both been struggling with infertility and had been too afraid to tell me because they didn't want to add to my burdens. You're never a burden, I told them. Your problems, your struggles, your lives, they're not burdens, they're what make you human. And I want to be part of your humanity, not just your dinner plans. At 9 p.m., after they left, I sat in my garden under the stars. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Can I come by tomorrow? Just me. I want to talk. I texted back, 6 p.m., bring takeout. For the first time, I wasn't cooking for my son. He was bringing food to me. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. Tuesday evening, Daniel arrived with Chinese takeout and an expression of nervous determination. Thanks for seeing me, he said as we unpacked containers of lo mein and General Tso's chicken. You're my son. I'll always see you. Even if I married someone who treats you badly? I paused. Daniel, I love you. That will never change. But I also love myself enough now to not accept disrespect. Those two things can coexist. We ate in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. Jessica and I have been fighting a lot since Sunday. She thinks you've turned me against her. I think she's been wrong and won't admit it fully. It's a mess. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. I put myself in the middle, he said. Or rather, I stayed silent and let you be hurt, which put me here. Mom, I've been thinking about something you said. About how you were afraid we'd stop coming around if you stopped being useful. Yes. Did you really think that? Did you really think we only loved you for Sunday dinners? I looked at my son, this man I had raised, and decided to be completely honest. Sometimes, yes. Especially after I retired. It felt like the dinners were the only time I saw you, and when you came, you'd eat and leave. You'd call during the week if you needed something, advice, money, help with something, but you never called just to talk. So yes, sometimes I wondered if the food was the only reason you came. Daniel's face crumbled. Mom, that's not true. We love you. I love you. I know you do, I said softly. But love needs to be shown, Daniel. And for a long time, it wasn't being shown in ways I could recognize. I'm going to do better, he said. I'm going to call more, visit more. And not just when Jessica and I are fighting or when I need something. I'm going to actually be your son again, not just someone who shows up for free food. I would like that very much. And Mom? Jessica's going to therapy. She found a therapist today. She says she needs to figure out why she does that, why she puts people down to feel better about herself. I was surprised, genuinely surprised. That's good, Daniel. That's really good. She also wants to have dinner with you, just the two of you, to really talk. Would you be willing to do that? Eventually, I said. But not yet. We both need some time, and she needs to work on herself first. After Daniel left, I felt something shift in my chest. Hope. Real hope that maybe, just maybe, this family could learn to function in a healthier way. Wednesday at the hospital, I was offered a part-time position, 3 days a week, 4 hours a day, working with patients in the children's ward and the oncology unit. You have a gift, the director told me. The patients light up when you're here. We'd love to make this official. A job, purpose, value that wasn't tied to how well I could roast a chicken or frost a cake. I'll take it, I said. That night, I called my sister, whom I hadn't talked to in 8 months. Margaret? She sounded shocked. Is everything okay? Everything is wonderful, I said. I just wanted to talk to you. I've missed you. We talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing, about her grandchildren and my new job, about the books we'd been reading and the shows we'd been watching, about life. When I hung up, I realized something profound. I had spent so much time trying to hold my sons close that I had let go of everyone else. My friends, my sister, my own interests and passions. No more. This was my renaissance. My reawakening. My second chance at living a life that was fully mine. And I wasn't going to waste another moment of it. 3 weeks after the Sunday that changed everything, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Linda, Jessica's mother. Margaret, I know this is probably the last thing you want, but I was wondering if we could have coffee, just the two of us. I almost said no, but curiosity won out. All right, when? Tomorrow? There's a cafe near the hospital where you volunteer. The next afternoon, I found Linda already seated at a corner table, 2 cappuccinos waiting. She looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. She laughed, but it was a sad sound. Margaret, I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. I stayed silent, letting her continue. I've known for years that Jessica has a cruel streak. She gets it from her father, honestly. He was the same way, charming in public, cutting in private. I used to make excuses for him, the way I've made excuses for her. Linda wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. At your house that Sunday, when she called you useless, I should have said something. I should have told her it was unacceptable. But I didn't, because that's what I've always done. Stayed silent. Kept the peace. Why are you telling me this now? Because Jessica's in therapy, and her therapist asked her to think about where she learned her behavior patterns. And Margaret, she learned them from watching me enable her father. From watching me laugh off his insults. From watching me teach her that some people's feelings matter more than others. I took a sip of my cappuccino. It was good, rich, and smooth. Linda, I appreciate this, but I'm not sure what you want from me. Nothing, she said quickly. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how I failed you, how I failed Jessica by not teaching her better. And I wanted to tell you that what you did standing up for yourself, it made me start standing up for myself too. What do you mean? Linda pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. It was from Jessica. Mom, why didn't you take my side against Margaret? Linda's response. Because she was right, and you were wrong. Love you, but that doesn't mean I'll support you when you're being cruel. I looked up at Linda with new respect. How did she take that? She didn't speak to me for a week. But then she called and said her therapist told her I did the right thing, that she needed people to stop enabling her. Linda's eyes were wet. Margaret, you changed my life that Sunday. You showed me what it looks like to value yourself, and I'm trying to learn how to do that too. We talked for another hour, about our lives, our regrets, our hopes. When we parted, Linda hugged me tight. Thank you, she whispered, for being brave enough to say no. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. Hi Margaret, this is Jessica. Would you be willing to meet for dinner next week? Just us. I'd like to really talk. No pressure if you're not ready. I stared at the message for a long time. Was I ready? I didn't know, but I was curious. Genuinely curious if Jessica could change, if she wanted to change. I texted back, Saturday, 6 p.m. Let's meet at Rose's Italian. We'll split the bill. The response came immediately. That's fair. Thank you for giving me a chance. Saturday came faster than I expected. I arrived at Rose's 10 minutes early and ordered a glass of wine. Dutch courage, my husband used to call it. Jessica arrived exactly on time, and I barely recognized her. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, more vulnerable. Hi, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Hi. We ordered food, neither of us very hungry, and sat in awkward silence until the waiter left. I don't know where to start, Jessica admitted. The beginning is usually good, I said. She took a deep breath. My therapist asked me to think about the first time I remember putting someone down to feel better about myself. I was 12. My dad had just told me I was stupid for getting a B in math. I went to school the next day and made fun of a girl in my class for wearing cheap shoes. I listened without interrupting. I've been doing it ever since. Whenever I feel insecure or threatened or less than, I find someone to put beneath me. And Margaret, you were safe. You were kind. You never fought back. So I kept doing it. Until I did fight back. Until you did, she agreed. And it terrified me. Because if you could stand up to me, it meant I wasn't as powerful as I thought. It meant I was just a bully who picked on someone who loved her family too much to defend herself. Why me, Jessica? Why was I the target? She was quiet for a long moment. Because you have something I don't. You have your son's unconditional love. Daniel adores you. He talks about you like you hung the moon. And I've always been afraid that no matter what I achieve, no matter how successful I become, I'll never matter to him the way you do. The honesty was shocking, raw, real. So you tried to diminish me, I said slowly. To make me less in his eyes so you would seem like more. Yes. Tears started running down her face. And it was cruel and stupid and wrong. Margaret, I am so sorry. Not because Daniel made me apologize, not because I want Sunday dinners back, but because I genuinely, truly hurt you, and you didn't deserve it. I felt my own eyes getting wet. This was what I had needed. Not a forced apology, but genuine remorse. Understanding, growth. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. That means more than you know. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Jessica continued, or maybe ever, but I want you to know I'm working on it, on being better. My therapist says I use achievement as a weapon because I never feel good enough, so I make others feel small to feel big. That must be exhausting. It is, she admitted. It's lonely too, because you can't build real relationships when you're constantly competing with everyone. Our food arrived, and we ate in more comfortable silence. Can I ask you something? Jessica said after a while. Of course. How did you do it? How did you stand up for yourself after so long? I thought about that Sunday, about the moment I drew the black line through my calendar. I realized that I was disappearing, I said. Not dying, but disappearing. Becoming smaller and smaller until I was just a function, the woman who cooks instead of a person. And I decided that even if it cost me everything, I'd rather exist as myself than disappear into usefulness. Jessica nodded slowly. I think I've been disappearing too. Into my job, my achievements, my image. I've been so busy trying to prove I'm valuable that I forgot to just be a person. It's never too late to remember, I said. We talked for 2 more hours. About her childhood and her father's criticisms. About my years as a nurse and the satisfaction of helping people. About Daniel and what it meant to love someone without competing with their other relationships. When we finally left the restaurant, Jessica walked me to my car. Margaret, I know we might never be close, but I hope someday we can at least be kind to each other. I'd like that, I said. And Jessica, thank you for being honest tonight. That took courage. I learned it from you, she said with a small smile. The next morning, I woke up to a group text from Daniel. Mom, Peter, Sarah, Jessica, and I want to host a family dinner at our place next Sunday. Nothing fancy, just takeout and being together. Would you come? I looked at the message for a long time. A family dinner. But not at my house, not cooked by me. Just gathering together because we wanted to, not because it was expected. I texted back, I'd love to. What can I bring? Daniel responded immediately. Just yourself, Mom. That's all we need. Sunday came, and I showed up at Daniel and Jessica's apartment with a bottle of wine and a small bouquet of flowers. Nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed I spent hours preparing. Jessica opened the door, and for the first time since I'd known her, her smile looked genuine. Come in. We ordered Thai food. I hope that's okay. It's perfect. Their apartment was cozy but messy. Takeout containers covered the coffee table. Daniel was struggling with chopsticks. Peter and Sarah were already eating spring rolls. It was chaotic and imperfect and wonderful. We ate sitting on the floor because they didn't have enough chairs. We laughed when Daniel dropped rice down his shirt. We talked about everything and nothing: work, books, the news, a funny video Peter had seen. At one point, Jessica raised her glass. I want to make a toast to Margaret, who taught us all that love shouldn't require you to disappear. Thank you for being brave enough to stand up for yourself. And I'm sorry it took us so long to realize we needed to hear it. Everyone clinked glasses. Daniel squeezed my hand. Peter smiled at me with pride. Sarah mouthed, thank you. And I realized something profound. This moment, this imperfect, chaotic, takeout on the floor moment, was more meaningful than any of the 624 Sunday dinners I had hosted. Because these people weren't here for my cooking. They were here for me. There's something I want to say too, I said, setting down my glass. For a long time, I thought that being needed was the same as being loved. I thought if I stopped cooking, stopped hosting, stopped being useful, you would all stop coming around. But I was wrong. You didn't need me to kill myself in the kitchen every week. You just needed me to be present, to be myself, and I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that. We should have told you sooner, Daniel said. We should have made you feel valued for who you are, not what you do. Well, I said, looking around at all of them, we're all learning. That's what families do. They mess up, they hurt each other, and if they're lucky, they figure out how to do better. Later that evening, as I drove home through the quiet streets, I thought about the journey of the past month, from that devastating Sunday when I was called useless to this Sunday where I felt truly seen. I had lost nothing that mattered and gained everything I needed: respect, boundaries, a life that was mine, relationships based on genuine love rather than obligation. When I got home, I walked through my house, looking at it with new eyes. The kitchen where I had spent so many hours was just a kitchen now. Not a prison, not a kingdom. Just a room where sometimes I cooked because I wanted to, not because anyone expected it. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my garden under the stars. My phone buzzed with messages from my sons, thanking me for coming, telling me they loved me. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I believed them. Not because of what I had done for them, but because of who I was. Just Margaret. And that was more than enough. 6 months after the Sunday that changed everything, I stood in my garden on a crisp autumn morning, pruning the roses I had planted in my moment of rebellion. My phone rang. It was Martha. Margaret, are you busy today? Not particularly. Why? Because I just signed us up for a painting class that starts in an hour, and you can't say no because I already paid for both of us. I laughed. Martha, you're a terrible influence. I know. That's why you love me. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. 6 months ago, I would have said I couldn't possibly go. I would have had meal prep to do, a house to clean, obligations that couldn't wait. Now, I grabbed my jacket and was ready when Martha arrived. The painting class was in a bright studio filled with women of all ages. Our instructor, a woman named Claire who had to be at least 75, moved around the room with the energy of someone half her age. Life is too short for boring paintings, she announced. Today, we paint with passion, with color, with joy. I picked up my brush and painted, not well, but enthusiastically. My canvas was a mess of blues and purples that might have been a garden or might have been abstract chaos. I didn't care. It was mine. You're terrible at this, Martha whispered, looking at my canvas. I know, I whispered back. Isn't it wonderful? We both dissolved into laughter, drawing looks from the other students. Claire walked over and looked at my painting. This, she said seriously, is what we call joyful disaster art. It's my favorite kind. After class, Martha and I went to lunch at a small cafe I had never been to before. We ordered wine at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and didn't feel guilty about it. You seem different, Martha observed. Lighter, like you finally put down something heavy. I have, I said. I put down the weight of other people's expectations. How are things with the family? I thought about the past 6 months, the slow rebuilding, the careful conversations, the gradual shift from obligation to genuine connection. Better, I said. Not perfect, but better. We have dinner together about once a month now. Sometimes at my place, sometimes at theirs. Sometimes we just meet at a restaurant. It's different, but it's healthier. And Jessica? Jessica is in therapy twice a week. She's working on herself. We're not close, but we're civil. Sometimes even friendly. She sent me a text last week asking for advice about a work situation. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That's progress. It is, I agreed. And Daniel calls me twice a week just to talk. Not to ask for anything, just to check in, to tell me about his day. Peter and Sarah had me over for dinner last month, and Sarah is teaching me how to use Instagram. Martha raised her glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I echoed. That evening, I came home to find a package on my doorstep. Inside was a book about gardens and a note. Margaret, I saw this and thought of you. Not because of your Sunday dinners, but because you mentioned loving to garden. Thank you for teaching me that people are more than their functions, Jessica. I held the note for a long time, feeling something warm bloom in my chest. This was what healing looked like. Small gestures, thoughtful moments. People seeing each other as whole human beings. The following Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked. Not for a family dinner. Not because anyone expected it, but because I wanted to make soup for Eleanor, my neighbor, who had been sick with a cold all week. I knocked on her door at noon, carrying a container of homemade chicken soup. "Margaret, you didn't have to do this," she said, her voice hoarse. "I know," I replied. "That's why I wanted to." The difference was profound. Cooking because I wanted to, for someone I chose to help, felt completely different from cooking because it was expected, demanded, taken for granted. That afternoon, I went to the hospital for my regular shift. Tommy, the 6-year-old I had been reading to for months, was being discharged. "Miss Margaret," he said, hugging me tight, "I'm going home today. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. Will you still be here, in case I come back?" "I'll be here," I promised, "but I hope you never need to come back." His mother approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for being here for him. For us. You made this so much easier." This was what value looked like, not measured in dollars or hours in the kitchen, but in moments of genuine human connection, in being present, in being seen. Later that week, Daniel called with news. "Mom, Jessica and I have something to tell you. Can you come over for dinner tonight?" My heart skipped. This was it, the announcement I had been waiting for. When I arrived at their apartment, both of them looked nervous and excited. "We're pregnant," Jessica said, her hand on her stomach. 12 weeks. We wanted to wait until we were sure before we told anyone." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, both of you, congratulations." Daniel hugged me tight. "You're going to be a grandmother, Mom." "I already am," I said, thinking of Peter and Sarah, who had shared their own pregnancy news just 2 weeks before, "and I can't wait to meet this little one too." Jessica's eyes were wet. "Margaret, I want to say something. I want this baby to know you, the real you, not just as someone who cooks or hosts, but as the strong, incredible woman you are. I want to tell them stories about how their grandmother stood up for herself and taught all of us to do better. And I want our child to have Sunday dinners at Grandma's house," Daniel added, eventually. "When you're ready, not because you have to, but because you want to. Because those memories mattered to me, even if I didn't show it well." "One Sunday a month," I said. "And everyone brings something. Deal?" "Deal," they both said. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From that devastating moment of being called useless, to this moment of being valued, respected, genuinely loved. I had lost nothing that mattered and gained everything I needed. When I got home, I walked through my house, looking at the life I had built for myself. The art supplies from my painting class scattered on the dining table. The schedule on my refrigerator filled with volunteer shifts, book club meetings, coffee dates with friends. The photos on my wall of moments that mattered, not just family gatherings, but me at the hospital, me in my garden, me living my life. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my favorite chair, the one by the window where I read every morning. Outside, the garden I had planted was preparing for winter, the roses closing up their blooms, saving their energy for spring. That's what I had done too. I had closed up the parts of myself that were being depleted, drained, taken for granted. And now I was saving my energy for spring, for growth, for blooming on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Peter. "Mom, Sarah wants to know if you're free next week to help us pick out baby furniture. Not because you're the only one who can help, but because we genuinely want your opinion and your company." I smiled and texted back, "I'd love to." This was what love looked like when it was healthy, when it was reciprocal, when it was based on genuine respect rather than obligation or guilt or fear. I thought about that Sunday 6 months ago, about the moment Jessica called me useless and my whole world shifted on its axis, about the pain and anger and humiliation I had felt, and I realized something profound. She had called me useless, but in doing so, she had freed me. She had pushed me to finally stand up for myself, to value myself, to demand the respect I deserved. In the cruelest moment, she had given me the greatest gift, the gift of self-worth. I raised my glass to the empty room. To being useless, I said out loud, and discovering that I never was.